that's the position you come from the Springbok side, I would say.
Well, I'm not too sure whether the guys will stand up to the snow conditions. I think you'll find the South African boats will be in front after half an hour, and that's the way it's going to finish.
The river's pretty low at the moment, so river takers will be very important. Getting the channels right. I believe if you take the wrong channel, get some sandbanks ahead, could make it interesting, but it should be a good race. The competition is very good at the moment.
Oh, the conditions are a lot different from what we're used to in Sweden. But last time I was not that good prepared, but this time we have been at a couple of days, and we also paddling at the berg, and we do here, so I think the team they're ready for it. I think the water is a little bit too low, but I think it's good for us, for overseas paddlers. Well, I think the braid is a lot better than the berg. It's a lot wider, and the channels are a bit more obvious. Give it a best shot.
So now, after the mountains and the roads, it's on to the BREEDE River between Drew and Swellendam for the first full international Grand Prix Marathon Series hosted locally. The start of the K2s and 3 boats from South Africa up against one each from Hungary, Great Britain and Namibia, what was to become an absorbing race. And so, with the K2s out of the way, the international K1s take their place at the start line, including paddlers from South Africa, Hungary, Sweden, Great Britain, Belgium, Namibia, Brazil and Swaziland. So it's very much an international field that breaks away from the line for the start of the race. And with the men off and running, the women take their place, including South Africa's Eintje Manfroni.
I expect competition, especially from the Swedes and the Hungarians. I don't think they've got definitely streams on the river, so I think I've still got a good chance.
Only 2 boats in the women's K2 class, a straight race between Angus Rodi and Andrea Biro of Hungary and South Africa's top women's pair of Sandra Erdley and Rory Bones. While in the women's K1, 4 boats make the start, with some strong competition expected between Eintje Manfroni, Asa Eklund of Sweden and the 2 Hungarian paddlers. The weather just about perfect for a race like this, and only the low level of the river possibly making things a little awkward. The first waterfall, and no one shooting this one because the international paddlers are unprepared for these sort of conditions, as well as the fact that no one wants to risk their boats with the Berg River Marathon just a few days after this one. So that means a compulsory portage and South African pair of Johnny Malherbe and Richard van Mansberg show the way to go for the rest of the pack just behind. Portage is a skill which can win or lose a race at times, and this pair really know how to make things move over land when it's necessary, although with all those sharp rocks around, no one is sprinting yet. Neil Evans and Graham Bird right on the heels of Malherbe and van Mansberg, followed by British pair of Neil Coleman and James Smythe. The downside of the waterfall is reached and the boats put back into the water, neither of the 2 leading pairs having gained an advantage. And while South Africans Lo Malherbe and Christa Vaal disappear into the distance ahead of them, the Hungarian pair of Zoltan Nashi and Thomas Pinter struggled, not used to African conditions, although brilliant on the flat water. Right behind the K2s, Alan van Coller leads the charge in the portage in the K1 class ahead of fellow South African Moray Wilson, with Britain Simon Dark and Belgium's Eric Verdijk are right on their heels. Some prefer to carry, some to drag the boats across the portage, although that's a definite risk of damaging something. Paul Byrne too sick with flu to worry much about that. Back in the water and their natural environment, the Hungarian pair give chase and start to catch up on the leading K2s once again. Lo Malherbe and Christa Vaal and the British pair also starting to pull back the gap. 2 leading boats have opened up. And there's no rest up at the front either. Malherbe and van Mansberg setting a blistering pace with frequent sprints. But Evans and Bird somehow managing to come back each time. Lo Malherbe struggling with both Blue and the British pair, trying desperately with partner Christa Vaal to keep hold of third. The Hungarian pair have set off without splash covers, which makes things very awkward when the water gets a little rough, slowing them down badly and allowing a gap to open up. Happily staying a little way behind the leaders, BREEDE and Evans were following precisely in their wake to make use of Johnny Malariva's knowledge of the river and the various channels and allowing them to break the path for him. But those tactics meant that there was no chance to pass the leaders, so BREEDE and Evans started to work harder and pick their own channels, trying to get past with some sort of gap that they could capitalize on. At the same time, Malariva and Van Mansberg knew that the other pair were better sprinters at the end, which meant that they were neck and neck once again, passing under the railway line at the Red Bridge. In the women's K2 class, the Hungarian pair were carefully keeping Erdly and Bohm of South Africa firmly in their sights, while Anki Mansbroni was setting the pace in the K1 section ahead of the Swedish and Hungarian paddlers. While the ladies were still on the portage, the leading K2 men had reached the stretch of the river known as the Golden Mile, where smooth, easy conditions make for fast paddling and quick times, as well as allowing the contestants to take it easy and recover some strength. Though Malariva and Christopher were managing to stay up with the very experienced British pair of Coleman and Smythe, despite Malariva's poor condition from the flu. And with Simon Dark having smashed the nose of his canoe, forcing him to constantly pump out of the boat with a foot pump, Alan van Conner was looking very strong. RIVER.avi, the Belgian and local paddler Moray Wilson were up with him, keeping things cool as they tried to save their strength for the final sprint. Up ahead at the compulsory portage at the weir, Malariva and Van Mansberg were catching up to the junior men and women who had started before them, trying to keep things on the boil to stay up with Evans and BREEDE, who had opened up a small gap. And not too far behind them, Malariva and de Waal with the British pair were starting to cut into the lead. And things were getting hectic now as several classes started to get mixed up at the weir portage. The Namibian pair of Johan Kleul and Bremer van Eyck at the back of the K2s were being caught by the leading K1s, although Simon Dark was dropping back due to the crumpled nose section on his boat. The K1s reached the weir and the leaders sprint across the portage section, too close to the finish to allow any time for rest now. Behind them, the women's K2 race was as close as ever. South Africans, Erdly and Bohm, working hard to stay up with the Hungarian pair of Erodi and Biro, who were keeping the pace on hard, despite looking very cool and relaxed. This was the South African pair's first taste of international competition at this level, and were acquitting themselves well. And although finding the strength of the Hungarians something of a surprise, they were keeping up the pace despite the breaking tactics that Erodi and Biro threw at them. Too far behind the leading women in the K2 class, the K1 girls were involved in a similar battle. Anki Mansbroni was paddling an excellent race, keeping right on the shoulder of the Swedish paddler Asta Elklund, the two Hungarian K1 women having dropped back along the way. But all the attention was on the end of the men's K2 races. Johnny Malariva and Richard Van Mansberg just failed to catch Neil Evans and Graham BREEDE.
Johnny and Richard were to over initially, but they managed to break the banks down. The two of us got away, and from then on it was tilting through the rapids. They got ahead at one stage, but we managed to get ahead of them just before the end stage here, and we were able to hold them off for a good win.
A good win for Neil Evans, who will captain the South African team to the Worlds in Spain later this year. And a good win as well for Alan van Conner, who just managed to hold up the Belgian paddler Erik Verdijk in the K1.
I'm not used to the rivers like these in South Africa, but I managed to stay with the South Africans, so I'm very happy with my performance. Erik paddled really well, because we had the advantage in knowing what to do in the channels, going hard in the channels, and he was always last into the channels, but he managed to come back each time, and he was very strong the whole way through the race.
Did you see him as a threat for the Berg River Marathon next week?
Yeah, I think he could do something. If he trips the river and gets to know it a little bit, he seemed to handle the channels very well. He wasn't unstable or anything. He paddled well through the channels.
And Simon Dark, until he had his problems.
Yeah, he was also looking very comfortable.
So you're looking forward to a good scrap on the Berg next week?
Yeah, I think they might do something on the Berg.
But doing something this week, Rodi and Bero sprinting at the line to just hold off the South African women in the K2, who put up an excellent fight all the way to the finish, less than a half a second back. And another win for the local paddlers as Auntie Manfroni makes it home ahead of Asa Eklund, still looking strong as she crosses the line in first place.
It's very tough paddling. It's the first time Rory and I've ever paddled against anybody international. And we found them extremely strong in the flat water, and we're going to have to get through a little bit of hard work before we go to Spain.
It went very well, but I had to paddle a very hard race. The Swedish girls really also did a lot of work and I enjoyed it.